welcome to the Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Rich Gear, today. Doug is actually doing behind-the-scenes camera duty today because we have an incredible slate of guests here. I call them my apostle friends because they're missionaries to different parts of the world. We have Barry Makel, his wife Bonnie. We have Teresa Jansen and Dan Jansen, and they're going to the Sudan area, correct? Mm-hmm. And you've been doing, how long have you been on the mission field right now?
38 years, close to 38 years, yes.
These are long timers, okay? And Dan, you and Teresa, you guys are getting ready to go, correct?
Mm-hmm. We're the newbies.
You're the newbies. But they're really not newbies. How long have you guys been going back and forth to Sudan?
Between 5 and 6 years.
Yeah.
5 and 6 years.
South Sudan.
South Sudan. Sorry, let's get that clarified. Yeah, the South Sudan. But it's really fascinating. We've known Barry has been a very big influence on my partner in crime here at Revolution Against Evolution, Doug Sharp. In fact, he was one of the ones that really got him thinking about Christ in a very serious way. But what do you do now? I guess what I'm going to go back to the beginning. What compelled you to go on the mission field in the first place? And what has kept you on track all these years to keep doing it? And what specifically do you do while you're on the mission field? So that was a pretty good lead-in. Now I'm going to let you talk. Your turn, both of you.
Okay, well maybe you should start off with what got you into Wycliffe Bible Translation.
All right, okay. I love languages. I just love languages. And when I came to the Lord at a Billy Graham film, when I was almost 17, I heard about Wycliffe Bible Translators. I had planned to be an interpreter with the government, actually. I'm Canadian born. And then I heard about Wycliffe Bible Translators, and I said, really? People do that for a living? And but I asked the Lord about it. I went to Bible school, took the missions major, and looked at different missions, and just felt like Wycliffe was the one that the Lord was directing to. And so I joined as a translator.
So, and then how did you two meet up then? How did that happen?
We met up in the course of our training.
Okay.
And translators at that time were taking 3 semesters of training before they went overseas. And Bonnie was in her 3rd semester of training, so just about finished. And my way into missions was a little bit different. I went to Michigan State University, and the Lord directed me into education, into high school teaching in biology, and I also attended a big missions convention put on by InterVarsity Christian Fellowship early in my time at Michigan State, and gathered up some information. And when I got out of Michigan State and was looking for a teaching job, I looked to the public school system, and it seemed like the Lord was shutting the door. I looked to the Christian schools, and it seemed like the Lord was shutting the door. And I said, Lord, what else is there? And I remembered having gathered this literature at this missions convention, and I remember them saying, missionaries have children that they really want to have well educated to return to their countries.
Oh, okay.
And so I said, okay. So I wrote off to some of these organizations, and the Lord directed me to Wycliffe Bible Translators, and so I kind of got into missions through my interest and the Lord's direction in educating missionary kids. And so most of my time in Papua New Guinea, I was a teacher in the high school there for missionary kids from over a dozen different countries.
Oh, wow, okay. And this was, where was this at?
In Papua New Guinea.
This was, so you've always been in Papua New Guinea, is that correct?
Yes, that's
okay.
right. That's right.
Yes, and that was what year did you said 38, wow, let's do the math here.
We went in September of 1979.
Wow. So that's pretty incredible. And how many, so have you been involved in educating? Has anybody been involved in the translating? Have you been in translating? Or?
We lived in a village our first 2 years among the Bukit people, and worked on learning their language, and I did do some translation for me to get some experience so that I could become a translation consultant, somebody that checks translation that other people do. And so that's been my job.
And in Papua New Guinea, how many languages are there that they've been working on? Or how many languages are there, period?
Over 800.
I can't even fathom that, quite frankly. And how many actual Bible translations have been done? Has it been a few? Have been how many have they actually been able to do? Do you have any idea?
I think it's about 200 New Testaments.
Wow.
And not very many complete Bibles, but 2 or 3, I think, by Wycliffe. Now there are other organizations that have done some translations as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Dan and Teresa, you guys are going over for a whole different reason in the South Sudan. Well, first of all, tell us how you got interested in going over to that particular country, because there's some real issues over there. And what is it you would like to see happen, and what have you seen happen since you've been going over there? I guess those are some of the questions I would like to answer. You're not involved in the language aspect as much, but you had to do some things. What's the language? Dinka language or something you were talking about?
Yeah, there's a lot of different languages also in South Sudan.
Yeah.
Not quite that many, but there's 60 different tribal languages, and then different dialects among those languages. So Dinka is one of the languages, and we're actually working on learning a little bit of several languages, at least basic greetings and things like that, because there's 5 tribes that live in our region, so 5 languages represented in our region.
So these are completely different languages, not just dialects, right?
Right, they're completely different languages.
Okay. How did you guys decide you wanted to go to this area? You've been going over there for how long now? 4 or 5 years?
5 to 6 years, yeah. And it was a gentleman named David Bowman, who has an organization, or was founder of an organization called Partners in Compassionate Care. And this organization saw the need to build a hospital there, and miraculously the money came in, and they went and they built a hospital where it seems inconceivable to build a hospital because the infrastructure is not there in the country. No paved roads. The roads are impassable half the year. There's no electrical grid. There's no materials in the country. Everything came in from outside of the country, even in containers clear from the United States. Wow. to do that. Now sometimes you can get things from Kenya, Uganda. But anyway, we've been working with Partners in Compassionate Care, and they felt David had a vision for. And the organization had a vision for doing community development, and so that's where we fit in pretty extensively. Is in the area of community development, and then there's been a little bit of evolution of our involvement there with the government giving Set Free Ministries a primary school and a secondary school, and so. We've been asked by Set Free Ministries to take on this project of reopening the primary and the secondary school, and we have a vision, and we're hoping that the local people catch a similar vision, or maybe even give us a vision of what they would like to do, because we don't want to be top down directing everything. We want to be facilitating, coming alongside the local people in running their own school and doing their own community development. And so we're using a model called community health evangelism to bring about the transformation in the community, where the people guide their own development process, and that will be occurring in tandem with our interaction with students and teachers and doing teacher training. And so the two things will be happening at the same time, and we do some working with the officials, doing training in societal values and scriptural principles that could be applied to government policy and things like that. Just presenting a biblical worldview so that it can be saturated into every area of the lives, and particularly focusing on leadership, whether it be pastors, government officials, NGO, which is non-government organization, leaders, university students, and so that's kind of in a nutshell what we're.
So you're both working on that together then? So you said you were developing a curriculum, is that correct?
Well, I have a real heart for oral preferred adult learners, and some people are an oral learner because of preference, that they prefer to hear rather than read.
Some of the cultures
the materials.
They learn by oral tradition.
Exactly,
Okay.
and especially in a region like this where the written language is still developing. They don't have a formal written language and especially one that's not used on a daily basis. It's specialized really for the Bible. That's the only reason anyone's ever had to write the Dinka language, is for the purpose of the
amazing.
scripture. And so because of that, people are oral preferred learners, and they're also oral necessary learners. They're oral by necessity. They can't read for the most part.
I'm the other way around, in one ear and out the other. If I don't write it and do it, it's gone. So that's a real development, I know, in a lot of more tribal society or where there is not a lot of written things. So you and Dan are working. How are you guys doing that? What are you doing? How does this work together, I guess, is what I'm trying to figure out.
Well, I've been trained in an oral Bible study method that's called Simply the Story Oral Bible Study. It's a way of taking the scriptures and really studying the Bible with an oral preferred learner. And we use those same techniques that we use in studying the scripture and teaching the scripture to apply to other areas like agriculture. And this is something new that we're just developing.
That's what I was getting into, because I know Dan's got a big agricultural heart. I know he really plants and growing, and you did a lot of that when you were there before. Mm-hmm. Didn't you go over there first? Did you both go together?
Our first trip was together.
Was it together? Okay, I guess I was thinking you went over by yourself the first time. So now in both your situations, was English an overall arching language now or not? Am I misunderstanding that? Or, I mean, I know you said earlier we were talking. Obviously, we were talking before this. So it's that you said that in the schools in the South Sudan, they learn their own language for the first 3 years or something. Then they start gradually going, and then the overall language is English. Is that the case in New Guinea or Papua New Guinea? Is that the same way? Is English the overall arching language, or is there other ones where there's several?
Well, English is not really the first language of very many people at all. They speak a local language for the most part, but a technique of education has been developed where in the schools, rather than coming into the schools and immediately going into English, they start out with their own language, their own local language. Then they transition during elementary school into a learning pattern with English, and so by the time they're in the high schools, they're all learning in English. They're being gathered from all these smaller schools into a high school, a central high school, and they can do all their teaching in English at that point.
Okay.
But English is really not the first language of very many people at all in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, and it sounds like this. Go ahead. Do you want to say something?
Well, yeah, there's also a trade language that covers most of the country has different names, but Tokpisin or Pidgin. And then there's another one that's more local called Motu in another part of the country. Those are three official languages from the country. And then there are other more local language of wider communication is what they call them nowadays.
Right. Now, both of you, you've traveled around in New Guinea. You're in different spots on the one. Why don't you explain a little bit? I know when I first got this, I thought Papua New Guinea was like a region in New Guinea. And that's very confusing for us Westerners who don't get over to those areas of the world, because it's like, why don't you explain it? So our audience can understand it a little bit better than maybe I'm explaining it.
Okay.
Or could explain
North of Australia is a very large island called New Guinea.
Okay.
And I think it's the second largest island after Greenland. Okay, that island is divided in half, basically, east and west, and the western part is part of Indonesia, and the eastern part is an independent country called the country of Papua New Guinea.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
So
like
I guess-
it's like United States of America.
I know. I guess I would like to say just call it Papua, and that's New Guinea, But the whole thing, the whole island's New Guinea. Okay. Or would they have like you had Haiti and Dominican Republic and the island of Hispaniola? Okay, it's a different name entirely.
Right.
That's what confused me for a long time.
Okay.
I got that goofed up. So the 1.5 Papua New Guinea is actually a separate country.
yes,
And it's under its own. It's an independent country.
yes, it's an independent country.
Okay. Now, what was its background? Because it had colonies in it at one time, right?
Right. Well, at one point, the western half, which now belongs to Indonesia, was a Dutch colony way back in the 1800s. Up until I think the middle of the 1900s, it was a Dutch colony. Okay, and the northern part of what is now Papua New Guinea belonged to Germany. And the southern and eastern part belonged to England, I believe.
Okay.
And through various political changes that happened in the 20th century, it all ended up becoming a single country. The one that had belonged to Germany had been ceded to Australia. The southern part that had been a British colony, I think, had been ceded to Australia, and they put those together and made them into the country of Papua New Guinea in 1975.
Well, that recent though.
Yes.
That's why I'm confused. I'm an old dog. I was alive before that happened, long before that happened. So, anyway, well, but you're the same kinds of thing, Dan and Teresa, the same thing in a sense. The Sudan was one country, and now it's separated into Sudan and South Sudan.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
It used to be the largest country in Africa. Sudan was when it was one country.
It was huge.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's split into two countries. So Sudan, it's not North Sudan, it's just Sudan is a country.
See, there you go.
Yeah.
And
then South Sudan is an independent country and still the newest country on the planet.
It's the size of Texas,
Yeah.
too.
it's pretty good size then,
Yeah,
still.
and that just happened in 2011. So it's only been a country for 5 years.
Wow. So, and you explained that there's not much infrastructure there. And in Papua New Guinea, there's quite a bit of infrastructure now, right? I mean, it's been developed quite a bit, but there's still a lot of rural and sort of
Remote.
remote. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I don't like to say the word primitive. I like to say some other word that gives. But you guys have been in some of those places, or where are all the areas you've been into so far?
Well, 80% of the population of Papua New Guinea still lives out in those places that we might consider more remote.
Okay.
They are subsistence farmers. They grow their own food. And so there's not a lot of infrastructure. There are a handful of roads, of paved roads, that one goes along kind of the north side of the island and one kind of goes along the south side of the island, and there's really not any connection between those main roads.
Okay.
There are some,
Because of a mountain ridge.
I was saying there's a lot of mountains there too.
Right.
Yeah.
but there are a few larger cities, towns, kind of by North American standards, where there is more infrastructure, better roads and such things. But a lot of people live, in a pretty rural situation.
Okay. Same thing in South Sudan. Because why? I mean, there's not. You said there's not much infrastructure. You didn't allude to it. You specifically stated there's not much going on there. Are they going to be developing road? I mean, I'm assuming that's what's going to be happening. Is this part of by educating people and teaching them how to do things? Obviously, from a biblical framework, you get a nicer. It was a government. You said application for government for just living conditions, that kind of stuff. So, because when you guys were going over there, both of you, again in your own words, what were some of the things you said? You love language, and you want to educate. And what did you love to do? You love teaching.
I love language, but I love working with oral preferred adult learners. That's what And
you're the plant guy. I always called you the plant guy. That's how I first got to know Dan. And Dan's been on our show several times. And Bears, you've been on it at least once, maybe twice.
Yeah.
Or three.
Twice, I think.
I think twice. Yeah. So they're not strangers to the show, but the fact that we're all believers here and have a certain vision to go over. I mean, it takes a lot of commitment and a lot of stamina and a lot of things. You've been on the road for a long time, 38 years. And you guys, you say you're the newbies, and yes, compared to them, yes, but still 5 years going back and forth. You're not, they're going to do this with their eyes wide open. And the heart to do that is an amazing thing, to go over there and spend years away from your family, people you've grown up with, even languages you know. I'm quite impressed with that. I want to let you know that I've always had a lot of respect and things for people who do that, are willing to just, in a sense, I believe, kind of sacrifice much, if not all, to go to these remote and hopefully not too hostile, but sometimes you get hostile areas and not fun to do that. I just thank the Lord every day for you guys. That's why I call them apostles. By the way, if you know what an apostle means in the Greek, one who was called and sent out. That's all it really means. We're not talking about they're going to go like the Apostle Paul and do certain things, although you never know. You never know. But when you're just doing it, you just think of yourself as just some guys and gals doing the work of the Lord, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
By His strength and by His grace.
Grace is a big thing.
Yeah. Why don't you talk about that a little bit? Either whoever wants to jump in and chime in, how you depend on God's grace to do the things you're doing. I know, obviously, one of those is being able to get an income stream so you can survive. It's got to be a big one. But there's a lot of other things involved in that. What are some of the things you, over the years, and some things you're running into? Whoever wants to chime in first, go for it,
I know that a lot of times people ask, what's the really hard part of being a missionary or doing this type of work? And I have different things that come to my mind all the time. And certainly the hardest, I think, is being away from family for a long period of time. But right up there with a really hard thing is, for me, at least on this newer side, is so often feeling incompetent. Here in the United States, I'm a competent person. I can shop and carry on conversations. I can ask questions, and I can find my way around and negotiate cultural situations that I don't even have to think about. But in a place like South Sudan, I feel like a 3-year-old half the time. I can't communicate effectively. Negotiating social situations is really awkward at best. It's a lot of work, and that work doesn't go away, and it's the stuff that you don't even know that is going to be your work before you go,
But God gives grace in those situations.
And that's where the grace is really needed. Yeah.
So what were some of what are some of the biggest challenges when you went over there and you found you have to continue? You've already addressed some of them, but Barry, Bonnie, what are some of the biggest challenges when you were there? I guess starting out, and that it maybe continued to be a challenge, and some things that you feel like you've pretty much, over the time, you've gotten pretty competent at things. You've overcome some of these challenges, but they still are issues. What are some of those things that happened to you? These are off the cuff questions, folks. So if they don't have a ready answer, it's okay. But I'm putting them on the spot, sort of, because it seems to me you've lived it for so long, you would know it's hard for you.
Tell me some of it gets easier. That's what I'm hoping.
The most important thing is being willing to follow the Lord. Flexibility. I remember saying to a friend, she was in her 60s, which I now am, and saying, haven't you been flexible long enough? Can't we ever get to the place where we can stop being flexible? The answer is no. But God does give us grace and enables us to do that. And just keeps reminding us. He keeps putting us in situations where we have to depend on Him.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where we need to be, but it's not where it's comfortable to be.
Right.
So in some ways it gets better, but in some ways, if it gets too good,
right?
Maybe the other shoe
we're not
drop.
growing,
Yeah, there is a definite blessing that comes from that dependence on God all the time, not knowing at all what's going to happen next, where you're going to be, recently even where you're going to spend the night that night, that happens. And then you see God meet those needs, and you can definitely say, God's at work in this situation.
Yeah, they were talking earlier, and I talked to Dan about this on the phone. They're going, they got black mamba snakes running around. I go, Yeah, I still think about the time when I was dancing around with a water box that swam between my legs, and I'm telling you, that freaked me out. We're in Michigan. We don't like those kinds of things, you know? You don't have a lot of that in Papua New Guinea, and not a lot of...
Not in the area where we lived.
In the remote areas?
Not snakes. In the areas where we lived. There are some in some areas of the country, and you know, if you get out in the bush, in the jungle, in the areas where we've lived, there have been places where there are scorpions.
Yeah, we have those.
And
You have those too?
Oh, yeah.
and insects that are carrying nasty diseases, which is not so obvious, but it's an important thing.
You have in Africa. Now, let's get to we only got a couple minutes left, and I'm trying to wrap this up real quick, but the reception you receive from the people there, how has it been? You know, I mean, you've been there a long time, and obviously you developed some rapport and relationship. You fairly recent, so were they always receptive, or I mean, there've been missionaries in Papua New Guinea for quite a while. Sudan, I don't know about so much. You know, I don't know what it seems. How do the people receive you and what you're trying to do?
We've been well received in terms of friendliness. We haven't necessarily, our message hasn't necessarily been well received. It's a real spiritual warfare going on there. So some people are glad to have us there, but they, you know, are still very much afraid of the spirits that they worship.
Oh, yeah, demons. So we call them over here. Well, how about you? The same. How you receive? How do the people treat you over there?
Yeah, the South Sudanese have a real reputation for hospitality, and so they're very hospitable and loving, and that's a blessing there. But there are a lot of challenges, and so we'll just negotiate those.
I think the women tend to have a little better experience than the men in that respect, just because the men are similar in some ways to men here. You know, they like to, you know, a little prideful and
razz each other a little bit,
jabs and stuff like that. And you got to have a little bit of a thick skin for a lot of that, because there's a lot of
teasing and stuff. The women do bond together. I do love. I'm glad I work with the women.
Well, it's been really great to see Barry, Bonnie, Teresa, and Dan here on the Revolution Against Evolution. See you next time.